What I did to score 521 on the MCAT in under 10 minutes. So I'll break this up into 5 parts, starting with preparation. The MCAT is definitely a daunting, overwhelming exam, probably the first time you've ever had to take an 8-hour long test, and don't worry, you'll have more of those in medical school. But I found that breaking it down and working backwards was really helpful for me. What I first did is to plan ahead and figure out exactly when I wanted to matriculate into medical school. I wanted to go straight through, so I wanted to start the fall after graduating my senior year in the spring. And so that meant I would need to apply to medical school junior year in the spring, and working backwards from there, I wanted to have my MCAT score before I chose what schools to apply to and hit that submit button. I wanted to also give myself some time to be able to retake the MCAT exam if I needed to and still get my score back in time before May when medical school applications opened up. So for me, I felt like January of my junior year was the best time to take it. And once you have a tentative test date, it makes it a little bit easier to work backwards, figure out how many practice exams you want to take, when you want to start really studying for it, and kind of figure out your rough study schedule. I started thinking about all of this the summer of my sophomore and junior year, and so I purposely planned out my junior year fall schedule to be really light in course load so that I could focus more on the MCAT. So I only took 4 classes fall of my junior year, 3 were super easy electives, and then my 4th class I chose biochemistry. So I purposely did that. 1, it was a requirement for my major. 2, it doubles as studying for the MCAT and also taking that course, so I really didn't need to study a lot of biochemistry on top of what I was doing for class. Throughout my fall semester of junior year, I decreased my extracurricular involvements as I got closer and closer to my test date, and I also didn't start off studying like 8 hours right off the bat. I gradually increased the number of hours I studied per week, and I really studied a lot and pretty much like 8 hours a day during winter break of junior year. Number 2 is going to be practice, and I can't emphasize this enough. The MCAT is not just a content exam. Even if you memorize every single thing, that doesn't guarantee that you'll get a really high MCAT score, because it's not just memorizing, it's being able to reason, critically analyze, and interpret what the passage and questions are asking you. And that's why many times when people who end up having to retake the MCAT exam, they always say that they wish they did more practice problems and less just passive learning, rote memorization from flashcards, and just reading from a textbook. I didn't know Q banks and UWorld existed when I was studying for the MCAT, and so I used a lot of practice tests as my way of getting those practice problems in. What I had at my disposal were the Kaplan practice tests, and so I basically would break those up into different sections. I wouldn't take all of my practice tests in the full 8-hour setting. Sometimes I would maybe take one section one day, review it, another section another day to really break it up, especially in the beginning of my studying. And I also post some of the other resources that I use to study for the MCAT, and all of this is also on my free MCAT guide. I also list out all of my practice test scores and other resources and strategies on my MCAT. It's also on my website as well. I also use practice tests to guide my upcoming study schedule. So especially a few weeks out before the MCAT exam, I took a practice test every week. I think about like 5 weeks leading up to my actual MCAT date. And so every week I would take my practice test, review my incorrects and corrects, and then use that to inform what I need to work on the following week before my next practice test. So I also didn't really plan out my study schedule like that far in advance, because things change. I might have to implement a new study strategy or incorporate new resources. So I try to be pretty flexible, and I don't think it helps to have like a dead set plan from the beginning, because you don't really know how you might want to study differently as you go through your MCAT dedicated period. For me, I kind of took my study schedule and practice like 1 week at a time, and just really made sure that I was able to be flexible and change things if something wasn't working for me. The third part of studying is strategy. So especially for the CAR section, it's so important to have down a strategy that works for you. I found one through reading the MCAT exam crackers textbooks, and it was so helpful and really helped me increase my CAR score. It basically tells you to read the passages. Also, I read the passages in order as they came in the CAR section. I think it's a waste of time if you're trying to jump from 1 to passage 9 to 7. Just go in order and briefly skim the passage, and when you first skim it, highlight important names, any dates. That will make it easier for you to refer back to when you're answering the question. And then after you skim the passage, before moving on to the questions, take a second to think about what that passage was about, what the author was trying to say. Was the author trying to inform you or persuade you, or what was their tone like? Was it positive or negative about the topic they were writing? Having a solid grasp of the main idea of the passage is going to be really helpful when you move on to the questions. When you first read the question, don't move on to the answers yet. Take a second to try to answer it first without looking, because that will help prevent you from being tricked by an answer choice that sounds good but is actually incorrect. So once I started even just taking a second to think about, what I think is the correct answer, it might feel like you're adding more time, but it's going to save you a lot of time down the road and it will really increase your score. Some other strategies I found helpful, especially for Chem Phys, is for the formulas. It's not enough to just memorize it, but you really need to understand how they relate to one another, like especially the energy, workforce equations. On test day, they're going to ask you to plug and chug multiple equations to create a new one that you've never used before, and it's important to understand how they relate to one another so that you know which ones to use correctly. And I outlined some other tips on my MCAT guide as well. Number 4 is discipline and perseverance. This MCAT definitely is no joke. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And so there are going to be many days where you'll feel unmotivated, when you don't want to study, when maybe you get a bad practice test score and you just feel really discouraged. It's okay to feel upset. It's okay to take a day off, and really important to take days off as well. But it's really important to remind yourself what the end goal is and that you can do it. If other people can do it, then so can you. For me, what I found helpful to tell myself when I felt really discouraged or just really didn't want to study was that I pretended like I could only take the MCAT once. Of course, if I needed to take it again, I would, but during my study period, I would pretend that this is my only shot at taking the MCAT, so I need to study hard and do everything I can to prepare for this test. And so that's something else that I really wanted to make sure I felt going into test day, is that I did everything I could and that I didn't have any regrets of like, oh, I wish I studied more, or I wish I did this instead. I wanted to try to get it right as much as I could the first time, and that helped motivate me, especially on days when I just really didn't want to do anything. The last thing I did that really helped me on the MCAT was staying positive and building that habit of positive self-talk from the beginning of studying for the MCAT to test day, especially for the couple weeks leading up to test day where I was studying for 8 hours a day for 5 or 6 days a week. I felt really sad sometimes if I didn't get the score that I wanted. I even remember crying after a practice test 2 weeks before my MCAT because my score dropped, and it was definitely not where I wanted to be. And so I just let myself take the day off. But then the next day I was just trying to be positive and motivate myself, saying I've studied my butt off for the past couple of months. I definitely know what I'm doing. This maybe was just a fluke, but I have to keep going and trust myself that I will be able to do well on test day. Especially during the test, that's where I think having that positive self-talk can help the most and help you stay calm, especially when you encounter a question that is just really confusing or has you frazzled. It's important to take a step back and just reassure yourself, and I think that really helped lessen some of the anxiety on test day for me. If I saw a question that I initially read and had no idea what it was asking me, I would just be like, okay, Clara, it's okay. You can move on to the next question, come back to this, or just reread this. You understand it. It'll be okay. You'll be able to figure it out. And honestly, I think that helped a lot on test day and even when I was taking practice tests. Hopefully this was helpful. The MCAT is a daunting exam, I know, but you'll be on the other side of it soon enough. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and good luck.